You'll let me know if it's crazy.
You have a little bit of an echo, but it sounds okay that way. But it sounds fine.
With the help of Hashem, we are learning Taanis Daf Chav Zayin. We left off on Daf Chavav Amid Beis, 7 lines from the bottom of the Amid, mamish in the beginning of the line by the little letter Dalet from the Bach, Vecha Idna. We just quoted the Machloikas regarding what do we do on fast days, whether there's going to be Birchas Kohanim. The reason why we don't make Birchas Kohanim normally by Mincha is because we don't want for the Kohen to be shikr under the influence, and it's common that people drink in the afternoon. And being that on a fast day, no one is eating nor drinking, theoretically, there should be no issue with making Birchas Kohanim. But on the other hand, we learned this freeway Machloikas Tanoim, and Rabbi Yossi says, Ne'ilah, you'll make Birchas Kohanim. Because Ne'ilah is only said by a fast day. But since Mincha is also said every day, if we're going to allow Birchas Kohanim to happen on Mincha of a fast day, people erroneously will think that you make Birchas Kohanim by every Mincha, and then you might come to make Birchas Kohanim while under the influence. And the last thing we learned was the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. Now, truth be told, we right now don't paskin like Rabbi Yossi. I know that we are not in Eretz Yisrael, and our minig is not to duchen every day. We only duchen on Yontif. But the Tefilla, the Shliach Tziburs, the Chazan's recitation of Birchas Kohanim during the repetition is in the place of Birchas Kohanim, and we actually do say Birchas Kohanim. The Tefilla, the Shliach Tzibur, does says Elokeinu v'Elokei Aviseinu, etc. on Mincha by every fast day, and that does not contradict the fact that the Gemara paskin like Rabbi Yossi, as we will see in a moment. Now we're going to continue to learn regarding what is the source that a shikr is forbidden to duchen. Where do we get that from? We're going to learn about the 24 mishmaros, and as we'll see, something new that perhaps is not that known is that 12 from the 24 did not go straight to Yerushalayim and HaKodesh, but they went to Yerichai. And as we will see, we were very careful in making sure that the people that live in Yerushalayim have abundant food and drink. When people will travel from everywhere in Eretz Yisrael, we're speaking about the Kehanim and the Leviim, when they would go to do their guard, if they would come from very far away, it would be difficult for them to carry with them all the food and the drink they need for the whole week. So they would stop in Yerichai, we'll see, for a few days. They would get the food and the drink over there, and they would actually bring it with them to Yerushalayim, making sure that there's ample supply over there. We're going to learn again a machlikas that we had in the previous Masechta regarding the mitzvah of the Leviim to sing melodies during the Avodah. And the question will be whether we say that Iker Shira Bepeh, in other words, is the principal mitzvah for them to sing it vocally, or is Iker Shira Bikli, or is the principal mitzvah instrumental, to play instruments, and then they would accompany those instruments vocally, and we'll see how that machlokas will play itself out in our sugya. We're going to learn a lot of very interesting background as to how did we develop to become a group divided into 24, the Kehanim and the Leviim. We will see actually there's many detailed machlekes, and already from the times of the Tanoim, we're going to learn that when Ezra went up after Galus Bavel, only 4 of the 24 groups went up. Imagine, and the result, the result that happened because of it. And if we'll see how far we're getting to Chav Zayin Amid Beis, the Gemara is going to explain why is it that Ma'aseh Bereshis is read during the Ma'amados services. We're going to learn 3 reasons why we don't have Ma'amados services on Sunday. It's understood why we don't have it on Friday, like we learned in the Mishnah, that the contrast of fasting to eating a lot on Shabbos doesn't go well together. It's not a good shidduch. If a person enters the Shabbos after a whole fast, they won't even enjoy having a proper meal. And we all have that experience. Many of us overeat after a fast, so that's clear. But why don't we fast on Sunday, going from Shabbos to Sunday? Maybe you can argue people overeat on Shabbos. Fast on Sunday. We will see 3 reasons. I think we'll stop somewhere middle of Chav Zayin Amid Beis. And as we progress towards the end of the Masechta, I think we're going to work it out in a way, since the last daf Lamed Aleph is a very small daf. We're gonna continuously finish somewhere early on the Amid Beis, allowing for the last daf to be a full daf, and many, many more amazing things on Daf Chav Zayin. Without any further ado, again, 7 lines before the bottom of the Amid, we paskin like Rabbi Yossi, which therefore the conclusion should be that nowadays, let's apply it to us. We now currently in Golus still live the last moment of Golus in Los Angeles. So according to this, the Tefilla should say the Birchas Kahanim, right, during Ne'ilah, but not during Mincha, but we say it during Mincha. So ve'ha'idna, or the Bach adds ve'elo. Ha'idna mai tama yes, parsei kahane yodayu b'mincha the Taanisa in Eretz Yisrael. It's not only the Shliach Tzibur, it's the actual Birchas Kahanim does happen during Mincha, says the Gemara. It's not because we don't paskin like Rabbi Yossi, we do. The answer is, this is very important, Kivan, the Besamuch L'Shkias Achama Kaparsi, since Mincha, according to Rashi, on a fast day, is davened all the way at the end of the day. Rashi writes, Mamash, the end of the narrow lines and going under the Gemara, that unlike during the year, many people daven Mincha Gedolah, and even people that daven Mincha Ketana, they're not particular to daven and dafka during the end of the day. By a fast day, Mincha is davened at a different time, so therefore, Ketfilas Ne'ilah Damya. It's just like the Ne'ilah prayer that Rabbi Yossi says. There you can say Birchas Kahanim because we're not afraid that you're going to confuse it with during the year. Because during the year there is no Ne'ilah. The type of Mincha, the time that it's davened already makes it clear that it's not your normal Mincha. Now, based on these words, there's a big machlokes and Periscope. What were to happen nowadays in a fast day if you don't daven mincha all the way towards the end of the day? Do you say that since most people daven mincha only towards the end of the day, and we all do that practically, just practical reasons, people are hungry, people don't have koyach to go and to come. Many times people daven mincha earlier because they go back to work. People normally by a fast day, if they work, they finish the work early. Nevertheless, again, there's a machlokes and Periscope. If you were to daven mincha relatively earlier, what would you do? And we saying the way we paskin is by every fast day, no matter when mincha's daven. Yes, we will have bayas and golos to shliach tzibur saying birchas kahanim, and we will follow those who opine that when you have the actual kahanim doing it, they will always duchen during mincha because it's like ne'ilah. Because since it's generally davened only towards the end of the day. Okay, Adkan.
Amen.
I have 6 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Chavav Amid Beis. All of this was based on the premise that a shikir is not allowed to duchen. And the Gemara wants to know what's the source for that. What's the source? So Amar Yeshua ben Levi, Mishum bar Kaparam, Lama Nismacha Parshas Kohen Mevarech. Kohen Mevarech means Nesias Kapayim. Why did the Torah juxtapose in Parshas Nazir? The Parsha of Birchas Kahanim comes right after the Parsha of Nazir. Loimer to tell you that Ma Nazir Asur Biyayin, as it's written explicitly. That's one of the restrictions of the Nazir. Af Kohen Mevarech, come on, is also Asur Biyayin. We learn it from the Smichos. For the Gemara, a simple question. If we're learning and we're comparing the Kohen that's Mevarech to the Nazir has other restrictions on him. Maskav Lavua, the Rav Zera, father of Rav Zera asked, or Amnillah, that the question is asked by Oishia Bar Zavda. Well, why don't we say, go all the way? Iman Nazir, Asir B'chartzim. A Nazir may not even eat a grape product. Chartzim literally means a seed, but it means all grape products. So why don't we say that Av Kohen Mevarech is also B'chartzim, but that's not the case. Kohen can eat grapes. The only restriction on the Kohen giving the bracha is not to become intoxicated with wine. So Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, I have another limit. So we have 2 limudim. And this is based on a pasuk in Parshas Eikev. The Torah speaking about the Kohen says, L'shar soy, that the Kohen has the merit to serve God that's in the temple, and Ulevarech B'shmoi. Ulevarech B'shmoi literally means to bless with his name. And we already just mentioned this, that the Kohen in the Beis HaMikdash didn't always articulate Hashem's holy name, the way it's spelled. That was done by Birchas Kahanim. Not only by Birchas Kahanim, but it wasn't done every time they made a bracha. So Ulevarech B'shmai is referring to the bracha of the Kohen given in the temple. So now, says Rabbi Yitzchak, Ma Mishareis, a Kohen that's serving in the temple is not prohibited to have great products. The Torah writes, Yayin v'shechar al tesh. He may not be intoxicated. Oh, so just like the kind that's serving is allowed to have charzan, again, literally means the seeds, but it means all great products. Af koyin mevarech is mutter b'charzan. Gebaldik. Now we are up. Let's go to the top of Daf Chav Zayin. Hold on. Frek the Gemara, I got a problem. If we are comparing the koyin who's duchening to the koyin that's serving in the temple, why don't we say imam mishoris? Balmum loi. A kohen who's serving in the temple may not have any of the halachic physical blemishes. Av kohen bevarech should also not be allowed to have any physical blemishes. Now, by the way, a kohen that has an external blemish on his hands, or if he's not wearing socks on his feet, taka should not duchen. That's what it says in Shulchan Aruch. Even though nowadays we cover our faces, we the listeners, but if we wouldn't, then we would be distracted from the bracha by looking at his hands or feet. So there are some restrictions regarding physical body blemishes, but they're nowhere near the limitations of the blemishes that we have regarding a kohen working in the Beis HaMikdash. So why don't we impose that as well? To which the Gemara answers that Rabbi Yitzchak was not negating the hekesh, the smichos, the juxtaposition that we have in Parshas Nazir. Ha'izkash l'nazir, and by nazir, a nazir who has a blemish could become a nazir. There are no limitations on a nazir, even if the nazir is blemished. So we're using both of these comparisons always leniently. And the question is, why always leniently? Fraging about a mic causes the makshat lekula. The makshat lekula is we do allow a kohen who's duchening to have grape seeds. We do allow a kohen who's duchening to duchen, even though he has a halachic blemish that would disqualify him from serving in the temple. Why don't we can make both of these comparisons in the opposite way? Let us say that he's not allowed to have grape seeds because he's compared to a nazir. Let's say that a kohen who's duchening is not allowed to be a balmum because of the pasuk in Parshas Eikev. We can go both ways. L'chumra answers the Gemara. Here's the key: that this entire hekesh is only a asmachta ninu, and therefore it's like rabbinic laws. When it comes to the rabbanans, we always go leniently. Whenever we are using a rabbinic system of asmachtas, by default, the rule is we always go leniently. And taka, indeed, we do restrict the kohen duchening, whether actually in the Beis HaMikdash, it's clear. But even if he's outside the Beis HaMikdash, it's compared to the service in the Beis HaMikdash. A kohen may never be intoxicated. That we say that even us who don't duchen every day in Golus, but the Shliach Tzibur is not even going to say the Birchas Kohanim during Mincha because he might be shikir. But on the other hand, he's allowed to have grape seeds or any other grape product, and there's no restrictions as the kohen who's doing the shedus regarding blemishes, only if there are some external, visible blemishes which might distract the listeners by staring at the blemish of the kohen. Okay. Referring back to the Mishnah says, Elu hei ma'amados. Now the words are Elu hei ma'amados. And the Gemara is asking, the Mishnah quotes the source as to why do we make ma'amados? And the words Elu hei ma'amados doesn't fit. Frek the Gemara, Maika Amar, and look inside the top of Rashi. The Kaboya ma'ninu ma'amados, the words Elu hei, they imply some sort of introduction to a definition, not the source, not a source, but we are giving a source. So in the Gemara, so indeed, Hachika Amar, Elohei Mamados. The Mishnah will soon, the Mishnah that we learned on Daf Chavav, describes some of the special service that was said during some of the special Torah reading that was said during the service of the Ma'amados. But before the Mishnah goes on to describe details of the Ma'amados service, the Mishnah really is asking, why do we need? Why do we have to have Yisraelim standing at a station during the avodah of the Kohanim and the Leviim? So here the Mishnah answers, and when it says in Parshas Pinchas, Tzavos b'nei Yisrael v'amart aleim es korbani lachmi leishai, and therefore the point is that it's the carbon tamid, communal carbon, really is a carbon that in which every Jew has a partnership in. That means that when they're bringing it, I'm bringing it, you're bringing it. And the question is, this is just explaining the Mishnah, the rule is certainly that when you bring your private kohen, you stand there. You're there. So what about the communal karbanis? So therefore, Hiskinu, Nevi'im, Harashainim, Esrim, Ba'arba, Mishmara is therefore the earlier Nevi'im. The earlier Nevi'im, as we will see, Shmuel and David, they divided the Kohanim and the Leviim. Okay, they divided them ultimately into 24 groups. Every group is called a mishmar. I'll call mishmar or mishmar. Again, the way Rashi learns, in addition to the 24 mishmaris of those who do the work, you made another corresponding 24 groups that was comprised of all three, not only of Yisraelim, according to Rashi, of Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim, and they were Keilu Shluchim of the Jewish people. And therefore, Higia Zman Mishmar La'alois, when the time came for each Mishmar to ascend, Kohanim Uleviim Oilem Yerushalayim, and some of the Rishonim here add the words Yisraelim as well. Okay, Adkan. Now we're going to have a lot of details that we did not have in the Mishnah regarding the Mishmarais. Again, the word Mishmar, actually, as the Gemara will unfold, when it comes to those who are standing over the carbon, let's quickly go back, just recap one point we had in the Mishnah, that the Yisraelim, the group of the Yisraelim that were designated to be the ones standing over the carbon at a station to observe two things. First of all, they didn't only stand there to observe. We're going to go back in a moment, and I want to read a Rashi in the Mishnah, Lav Chavav, where these Yisraelim were also hands-on. There were things that they needed to do to help the Kohanim and the Leviim do the service. Rashi writes that they would be woodcutters, they would bring water. In other words, they were there also to lend hand. That's very important, because since they were needed to help with the Avodah, that explains the machlokes that we're going to get to maybe in next daf in the Mishnah between Rabbi Akiva. We're going to review that argument, and Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yeshua regarding when don't they have to do the special Maimed service because they're saying hello, or because there are extra karbanos, because there's musaf, and so what if there's musaf? Because they were not only sitting and watching, they were helping, and whenever their help was needed, so they were exempt of the special Maimed service. Okay, so Tana Rabbanan. Another Nakuda, just to say it out by heart, that we go back from the word Mishmar to Maimad, and it will become clear that when we are going into specifics, the group of Yisraelim that are standing in Yerushalayim, observing and also lending hand, being the helpers at the Karbanos, they sometimes are called in the Tanoim Mishmar, referring to the Yisraelim. The Yisraelim that did not go to Yerushalayim, but they gathered in their cities, and they were the ones that fasted on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And they also participated in that special Maimad service. They are called Maimad, Mishmar Maimad, as you'll see. Sometimes the word Mishmar only refers to the Kohanim that are doing the Avodah. Sometimes Mishmar will refer to the Yisraelim, but only to the Yisraelim that are in Yerushalayim, Mishmar. And Maimad, in details, refers to the Yisraelim that Bechlal don't go to Yerushalayim. I think that will shed some light and not getting confused as what Yisraelim we are referring to. Okay. Tanu Rabbanon Esrim ba'arba mishmaris be'eretz Yisrael u'shtei mesre b'Yerichayim anayim ma'isa. 24 mishmaris are in Yerushalayim, and there are 12 in Yerichai. Mashma that on top of the 24 there's another 12, and that's not true. If in addition to the 24 there's another 12, that means are you telling me that there's a total of 36? No one ever heard of 36 mishmaris. Then it's much more than 24. So the Gemara clarifies this brayso that from the 24 mishmaris, here we are speaking about Rashi, the kohanim that would go up to actually do the avodah, not all of them would go at the same time. Bechlal, we already spoke so many times that they ultimately divided them into Batei Av, 6 Batei Av, 7 Batei Av, and even though that if it's not your day, you needed to be around in case there's too much work and you're needed. But as we'll see over here, not everyone was there actually. 12 of the 24 first went to Yerichai. And they stayed there for 3 days. Let me say it out by heart. And then the other 3 that went to Yerushalayim first, they went to Yerichai. There was a switch of guards. Okay, weiter. Going back to the Brisa. It says the Brisa when the time came for the entire Mishmar to go up, that's the word. Half of them went, as we always know, they went from wherever they are to Yerushalayim. But the different girsas, let's go Liyarichai. Why? In order for them to supply both water and food for their brothers in Yerushalayim. What's Pshad? Zot Rashi, 10 lines from the top of the Amid. Rashi, Hachi, Garcin, and Igias, Mana Mishmar, Chatzi, Mishmar, Oil, Yerushalayim, the Chatzi, Mishmar, Oil, Yerichai, Kadeshi, Sapko, Maya, Mazlechem, Yerushalayim, Kaloimar, Kate, Sadhoya, Yud base Biyerichai. How the 12 go to Yerichai explains Rashi that Kishigias, Mana Mishmar, Alas, Yerushalayim, Shabbos comes the week for this Mishmar, Mischalkin, Anshe, HaMishmar. The Mishmar group actually divided into two. Now, I mentioned the Beisav. Maybe it's not 3 Beisav versus 3 Beisav. Maybe from every Beisav, maybe half and half. Probably it's 3 Beisav and 3 Beisav. And half of them went to Yerichai, which is near Yerushalayim. Why? In order for them to provide water and food, which makes so much sense. All the 24 did it. That's important. In other words, every group they alternated. Nimsa Yud Beis B'Yerichai. There's always going to be 12 in Yerichai. Not everyone came from nearby. If I come near Yerushalayim, I would go there. I would have koyach to schlep food and water. So when I'm as a kohen coming to Yerushalayim, I'm not burdening the city for them to have to provide more food and water for me. I'm taking my own food and water. That's the word. When I'm coming from very far away, it's hard to travel with big peklach. So you would, now today it's a whole different world. Today you come to the destination and everything is wherever you want it. It wasn't that way in those days. So not to
they provided food only to Kohanim or to all travelers?
They provided the Kohanim they provided food for the Kohanim that are doing the avoid in the Beis HaMikdash.
But no one else.
It was expected from the Kohanim that are serving in the Mishmar that they should come there with their own food. It's not that they couldn't go to a local market, but what happens if there's a limited amount of food in Yerushalayim? We don't want, for the fact that so many Kohanim would arrive there, for that to overly burden the food supply in Yerushalayim. That's the way I understand. Okay, right. Now, says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Kohanim Uleviim, the Yisraelim, now that we introduced in the Mishnah of Chavav, the whole concept of Mamadois, all 3 of them are Ma'akvin and Sakarbin. That means if you didn't have the Yisraelim standing there at their station, then the entire avodah is not kosher. That means it's essential. That is said in the name of Shmuel. In a Brisa we learn that Tani, Rab Shimon ben Elazar, another detail. Here it says that Kohanim Uleviim Uklei Shir Ma'akvin Sakarban. Now the fact, just to know that this second Brisa doesn't say the word Yisraelim is not a problem. They're not arguing, but they're going into another detail regarding the Kohanim and the Levium, that they needed not only to be there, but they needed to have musical instruments. The first Baraisa never makes a mention of how musical instruments is ma'akev, because it's not. And the Michael Miflagi, we already had this, we already know about this. Machlaikis, Mar Savar, that goes to Amar Rav Yehuda Shmuel, that Iker Shira Bapeh, that the main mitzvah of the Levium is vocal. And if they did not come with the musical instruments, it's not ideal, but it's not essential. The avodah of the Levium is valid. And this Baraisa, the Baraisa of Rab Shimon ben Elazar holds Iker Shira B'Kli. If the main mitzvah on the Levium is instrumental, then if they didn't bring their klei shir, then it's taka ma'akev, the carbon. And now, how did we get to these 24 groups? It goes without saying, right? When God shows the Aaron HaKohen, and it's beginning with 4 children, and sadly 2 of them passed away on the first day of their avodah. So he was last. Aaron was Aaron, and Elazar and a summer. You don't have 24 groups from Elazar and a summer. Now, during the years in the desert, Elazar and the Summer's families, Taka became larger. And again, there was an initial division of the Mishmarais, and then there was a subsequent additional division of the Mishmarais, and we'll see really a machlokes in the details. Amar Rav Chama Bar Guria Amar Rav. This is going to be the first approach. Moshe tikein lahem liyisrael shmoina mishmaris. We began with a total of 8. A total of 8 meaning, it's interesting how Aaron, the Kohen Gadol, is not part of a group, because we learned that the Kohen Gadol, we learned this in Yuma. He's not bound by his week. The Kohen Gadol gets to do the avodah whenever he wants. So he's out. So you really only had 2 sons. Over the 40 years, Baruch Hashem, they multiplied, and every group was divided into 4. Arba'ah from Elazar, and Arba'ah from Isamar. Came along Shmuel, going now many years later, and Ve'emidam al Sheish Esrei, doubled them. In other words, the total of 8, he made it a total of 16. But David, which was not that far away from Shmuel, right? I know David outlived Shmuel, but he was the one that ve'emidam al esrim va'arba. And once he set it to 24 groups, like we mentioned, even though Baruch Hashem, the tribe of the Kohanim multiplied many times over, we never divided them into more groups, even though we made subdivisions. Shenemar, as it says, Bishnas ha'arboyim l'malchus David. There, nidrashu v'yimatzei. They were sought and they were found. They found mighty men in Yazer Gilad, and you have to see the context of this pasuk. Prior to this pasuk, you should know that here in Divrei Hayomim we enumerate all of the 24 groups. The reason why Rav Chama Bar Guria is bringing this pasuk is because here it says that the 24 concluded in the 40th year of David. That's what we want to bring over here. In the 40th year of the reign of David, Shmuel was no longer alive. That's the proof. Is that that's considered after Shmuel. David was the one that did it. Shmuel, 16. David made it into 24. On the sheet of Rav Chama, in the name of Rav, it says in a Braisa, and really, as we'll see, we're going to have 2 Braisas. It says in a Braisa, Moshe Tikel and Yisrael, Shmoina Mishmaris. So far, so good. We're beginning with 8, like we mentioned, 4 me'elazar, va'arba'a me'isamar. Listen to the words now in the Braisa. Ba David Shmuel, and right away it went from the 8, it went to 24. Shenemar, as it says, Heima Yisa David Shmuel, which is Shmuel called Shmuel Haroya. Be'emunasam. I want you to know Be'emunasam here has a very unusual translation. Be'emunasam means that they established it for all time. That's the Be'emunasam. Meaning, again, that after they established the 24 groups, even though the families multiplied, everyone belonged to one of these 24. Bottom line is that clearly you see it wasn't 8, Shmuel 16, and David 24. It went to 8 to 24. So the Gemara says this Braisa doesn't disprove anything, because Hachi Ka'amar, what the Braisa means to say that Miyisoidoi Shel David Ushmuel Haramasi, right, from what they established, not what they established at the same time. No, they both played a role. Shmuel played a role, then David played another role, and you ended up with 24. So this Braisa can be speaking very generically, and it doesn't contradict that which Rav Chama Bar Guria says in the name of Rav. But again, we're going to see clearly that not everyone subscribes to that. Tanya Idach, Moshe Tikem, Yisrael, Sheish, Esri, Mishmaris. Moshe Rabbeinu was the one that enacted the 16. 16, my friends, not 8, 16. Shmoinim Elazar, Shmoinim Esamar. Now, Uchesherabu b'nei Elazar al b'nei Esamar, as time went on, for some divine reason, the family descendants of Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen multiplied more, much more than Esamar. What happened then? Chilkom v'hemidom al esrim ba'arba. You went from the original, listen to this, from the original 16, you went to 24. However, as we will see, you remained with the same 8 of Isamar. The family of Isamar was not given more mishmaris. The family of Elazar was doubled. They went from 8 to 16. So you have 16 and 8, that's the 24, a whole different historic background. And here again, we have a pasuk in Divrei Hayomim, where it says that Vayimatzu b'nei Elazar rabim. Clearly, the Bnei Elazar were more than the Bnei Isamar, and therefore, Vayechalkum levnei Elazar rashim lebeis avos shisha asar. That Elazar went to 16, and we're beginning with the premise that they began with 8. Well, the Bnei Isamar lebeis avosim remained the original 8. The Oimer, another pasuk in Divrei Hayamim. Now, why do we need another pasuk? The Gemara is going to say it's like it's so clear that base of echad ochus le'elazon. Echad ochus means one extra for elazon. For each one, there was another one. So they began with 6. They doubled elazon. The achus achus. The taichi will mean that the same unit remained. Not, it says achus to double it. Don't forget, the achus li summer means that the unit that has been remained the same because their family did not multiply nearly as much as the family of Elazar. Now, Frag the Gemara interrupting, why did the Braise even have to bring another va'omer? It was so clear from the pasuk that it brought above. So sfichi taima dichi hechi benefishi b'nei Elazar, maybe hachinam benefishi b'nei Summer. And in other words, maybe it wasn't that Isamar Mamish remained the same. Maybe they all began with 4 and 4, the way we had before. And then when we began to add, we added a lot more to Elazar than to Isamar. Namely, Shmoina Meikara Arbahav. That it began like the Isamar also only began with 4. Eloma, we went from 4 to 8 for Isamar, and we went from 4 ultimately to 16 for Elazar. So for that, v'oimer, know that Isamar remained the same. That base of echad achus le'elazar, for every unit, we added a unit. We added an achus, which means they began with 8 and they added 1 for each, doubled, it went to 16. And v'achus achus le'Isamar means that the unit remained the way it was. Clearly, that they began with 8. So this is clearly a tiyufta that Rav Chama bar Guria. Rav Chama bar Guria, indeed, a machloikes tanoim, and the Gemara was not compiled at the same time. We already learned the first meisvei the Gemara had was quoting a Braisa, and the Braisa says Moshe tikkalam liyisrael shmoina meshmaris right above clearly arba'a me'elazar v'arba'a me'isamar. So whoever wrote the words teyufta that Rav Chama bar Guria didn't yet know that Braisa, and now we're putting it all together. So the Gemara answers indeed Rav Chama bar Guria that it's a machloikes tanoim. Yes, the second Braisa began with a total of 16, and it went from 16 to 24. And I hold, like the first Tana, know that it began with 8. And actually, not only did it begin with 8, but each group, right, the 3 steps that he gives from 8 to 16 to 24. Okay. Says the Gemara towards the end of the Amar over here, Tanarabanon, Arba'a, Nishmaris, Olumin very sad. We know how few Yidden went up with Ezra. We know in other places that there were so few Leviim that Ezra penalized that the Leviim should not be the recipients of Ma'aser Rishon. And they were speaking about even the Kohanim. Don't forget, all of these groups were from the Kohanim. So from the original 24 groups head, there was only 4 that went up. And these are the 4: Yedaya, Charim, what is it? Pashchur, and Imer. Now I just read inside the Rashi, the last line in the Amud. So the Rashi, Pashchur umiboya li. Rashi says it's bothering me that the Pashchur like Siv Gabi Chav Dalad Mishmaris. The psukim that we quoted above, we just read the end of the pasuk, but the psukim of Divrei Hayamim, the Torah enumerates their names. The name Pashchur is not written there, which means there's the name of the family as it is recorded in scripture. And then for some reason, we, in the Brais and the Torah Shabbat Peh, we give them the name of Pashchur. But anyways, these are the 4 families. Now, what happened?
Why did they not return, Rabbi? So they stayed in Babylonia. Why would they not return to Israel?
That's a good question. In other words, the Eden were so comfortable in Babylonia, and we were self-autonomous, and we were allowed to go and come as pleased, that it was difficult. Listen, let's not judge them. It was difficult for them to go to Eretz Yisrael. So what happened? Listen, this is very important. So the Nevi'im Shebeinayim. Now the Nevi'im Shebeinayim was Ezra and the other Nevi'im that were there. Chav Zayin Amid Beis. And the Chilkum Behemidum Alasam Ba'arba. This is so fascinating. In other words, we knew that there has to be 24 Mishmaris. Even though in the beginning, when there were fewer Kaihanim, according to one opinion, there was only 8, according to the Braisa of Rav Chama. Doesn't matter. Once it was established that the Kaihanim should be divided into 24, there is no going back. So what they did was, now these families, every family grew. So from these 4, they made 24. In other words, really every family was divided into 6. That's what they needed to do. Divided into 6. Not only that, look at the miracle, a nace happened. What was the nace? That now that we gave every family, really, we divided each one into 6, so there was the original name, and then we added 5 new names. And all of these 24 new names, right, from the 24 original and 20 new ones, were put into a lottery box. And Yedaya, who now became the first of all of the families, so there was Yedaya, and there was 5 other names that were really his descendants. Now they picked these names out of a lottery box. The miracle was, listen to this, that all of the 6 of the same family came consecutively, one after the other. Gewaldig. So when they picked from Yedaya, the Natal Chalkoi, what came out? In the Ruach HaKodesh, what came out was V'chelik Chaver of Sheish. Didn't have to be that way. It could have come out on any Seder. They mixed them all up, but all of the families ended up serving one after the other. Similarly, Bacharim, V'natal Chalkoi, V'chelik Chaver of Sheish. And that was the Seder. So we know the Seder here from the second temple, which is not written in scripture. So it was Yedaya plus 5, which were really originally all part of Yedaya. Then came along Charim. Then number 3 again, whoever Pashchur is, came and V'chein Imeir. Now, over the time of the second temple era, other of the original families did come up. So what happened now? So they made the following stipulation that even if Yehoyariv or Yehoyadiv, they were the first of the 24 Mishmaris in the first temple era, that even if Yehoyariv will decide one day to return, even though he was known as the Rosh Mishmeres, if he comes up during the second temple, he won't displace that order. He's going to enter. They were not expelled. Eliyah Ikar and Yehoyariv, let's go with Yehoyariv, became Tafuloi. Now, what another very important detail came and held up over here. You have 24. We said that every family was divided into 6. When Yehoyariv came up, you can't have 24. You can't have 25. You can't have 25. So what you did was you took one of the families, one of the additional 5 total of Yedaya, but you took one of them and you included them in the other. In other words, you needed to diminish the subdivisions of the 4 that went up to allow entry of the original ones that were left for later, but they were left later. In other words, the big shift is that Yehoyariv's Mishmar was the first, never again. During the second temple, it became Yedaya.
That was his punishment for not returning to Israel?
Yeah. He got displaced. He lost that chashivus, but he was not completely displaced. No, it's according to how many came up, you didn't diminish by, God forbid, excluding anyone. You re-included every of the 4 became 6. So then that number was the number that you would go back on. You would make them into 5, and if more families would go up, you would make them into 4 in a way that it's fair. I mean, there's certain details that are not discussed, like which one of them will remain with 6, which will remain with 5. That's not written here. But the point is, we never went more than 24 mishmaros. Right. Going back to the Mishnah. Mishnah says, "V'Yisrael shebo eisam mishmar miskansen ba'areim." And what do they do? Again, I want to emphasize, whether you'll see it soon or whether you see it in tomorrow's stuff, that generally. We go back, we call them the Mishmar, right? The Yisrael Shebo Eisam Mishmar. Sometimes they're called the Maimad, and sometimes the Braisa will use the word Mishmar, Dafka, for the Yisraelim that stood in Yerushalayim. And again, they didn't only observe, but they also were used as helpers. Things that were needed, they needed to give a hand, and the Yisraelim that stayed in their cities specifically are called the Ma'amadois or Maimad. And one of the things that was done during there, not the only thing, one of the things that was done by the Maimad service, you'll see there was a special prayer that they added, but they also read the Torah. And the Gemara wants to know, meaning what connection is there between Ma'aseh Bereishis and these Mishmaros, which are all connected to the Karbanos. In other words, the Leviim were there to play music. I mean, everything, the Ikar Avodah was Karbanos. But the Maimonides, as we learned in the Mishnah, was because every Jew has a chelik in the Karbanos tzibur, we have to stand to observe the offering of the Karbanos. And the answer, I'll only say it by heart, is that the avodah of karbonos is that important to God Almighty that the whole world only exists because of it. Which means Ma'aseh Bereishis is only continuing because of the avodah of the karbonos. Now the obvious question is that throughout our history so far, tragically because of Galus, there has been too much time that there was no actual karbonos. So how does the world exist? The Gemara is going to address that. But the Gemara answers that you should know ilmolei ma'amodos, and I know here my modos means karbonos, which is the reason why you need to have my modos. Lo niskaimu shamayim va'aretz. There is no world if not for the karbonos. Shneimar, as it says in Parshas Lech Lecha, Vayoymar, that Avraham Avinu calls out to God Almighty, Hashem Elokim, B'mo'eda ki ir Hashem. Knows when he heard the Psura Sa'aretz, he wanted to know, how do I know? How will I know? Avraham Avinu believed in God. God told him that your children will inherit the land. What was his question? It wasn't a lack of faith. Give me a proof. B'chlal not. Here, the Gemara gives us the real back and forth that took place between Avraham, our grandfather, our father, Avraham Avinu, and God Almighty. That Omer Avraham, I know that now you're making that promise, but history has shown that when we, God forbid, don't do what you want, there's a consequence. What was the examples Avraham Avinu brought up? That was because of certain misbehaviors. And even if there were times that we were not completely annihilated, humanity wasn't wiped out, but then there was a Doir HaFlaga. And Doir HaFlaga means that there is golus, there's a disbursement. So that's the worst. So you promise not to bring a mabul to the whole world, but locally there can be a mabul. And even if not, how do I know that he asked about the Jewish people, not about God. God is trustworthy. But how do I know that we will always merit to be with the land? So Amaloi, so God told him, Lav, I will not completely disperse the Jewish people away from Israel. But give me the logic. In other words, how to say that it means it will never sin. Avraham Avinu never understood that that's a possibility. There's always going to be times where we will be unworthy, which means what he really asked was, what zechus will we always have for which I will know that we'll never lose the gift of the Holy Land? Now you get the bet. Now what really happened, but the Torah writes explicitly, is that Hashem made with Avraham Avinu the bris bein hapsarim. And what happened, technically, the pshat was Amarle Choli Egla Mishuleshes. Literally means Hashem told him to take 3 calves and the A's Mishuleshes and 3 goats, and they were cut in half. Cut in half means they were cut down in their length, not in their width. And half was on one side, half was on the other side, and the whole bris bein hapsarim that Avraham Avinu walked through the 2 halves, and the fire representing God walked together with Avraham Avinu. That is the pshat, the drasha that we are learning here in Chazal is that these animals represent karbanos. What Hashem told Avraham Avinu is that even if in the future there will be times that the Yisrael will be chaytim, the schus that we will always have is the karbanos. Ubischos hakarbanos, we will have dominion over the Holy Land. Now, Avraham Avinu had Ruach HaKodesh, and he saw that bringing karbanos, as we know, is not so pashut. Right, before the Mishkan, we can bring karbanos on a bama. During the 40 years, there was an isur to bring bamas. 14 years of Gilgul, since it wasn't permanent, and the Yikr, since the Aron HaKodesh was not in the Mishkan, we were allowed to bring karbanos and bamas. But then during the next 369 in Shiloh, there was a Isra on Bamas. 57 Heter Bamas. From when the Aron HaKodesh came to Yerushalayim, forever, we, the Jewish people, we spoke out the Tosfos that holds that Goyim nowadays can bring karbanos on a Bama. But we are not allowed to bring karbanos only over there on Harabayis. So Amal Lafanav Ribono Shel Olam Tanach Bisman Shebeis Hamikdash Kayim. But Bisman She'ein Beis Hamikdash Kayim Atei Aliyah. This is so important. So Amar Loi, God responds to Avraham Avinu, Kfar Tikanti Lehem Seder Karbanos. Seder Karbanos is that Hashem told Avraham Avinu that in the Torah I'm going to write the portions relating the mitzvah of Karbanos, Vayikra, and in other places. And we are going to enact that. We're going to put it inside our Sidurim. And every time we read the Seder HaKarbanos, Bisman shekorin behem lefani, if we only read it because we don't have an option. Obviously, when we have the option of a mizbeach, then we have to do it b'poil. But if we can't do it, then just saying it, ma'aleh ani aleim ki'ilu hikrivum lefanei. Hashem will say, I will consider it as if they actually brought the korbanos, and therefore, even though yes, there will be times that we will misbehave, but the ani moichel lohem al kol avoy noiseyam. How great is that? And the whole topic of women and prayer. How much of the siddur are women obligated to say? We Paskin the Alter Rebbe says that women are mechuyev to daven the shachris and mincha, because the mitzvah of tefillah in principle is not a zman gerama. The zman gerama is only midrabanan, that whole sugya, and then the machlokes between Ashkenazim and Sfardim regarding birchas kriya shema. Shema is for sure they're not obligated. That's a mitzvah saseh zman gerama, and then the machlokes we learned at the end of. I think it was at the end of Sukkah, the machlok is whether they are allowed to do a mitzvah seishas man gerama. Al toisiv we paskin, everyone paskins that they are allowed to do it. Do they make a bracha? Machlok is Rashi toisiv ultimately. So birchas krishma, there are certain parts of tefillah that women don't say, that women do say, where it's more important, where it's less important. I want to come up with one thing that you can argue. Aside of davening Shemona Esrei, perhaps the most important part of the siddur that women should read is the korbanos. Nowhere does it say that korbanos is exclusively connected to men. It's not. Women are obligated to bring korbanos just like men. Now, truth be told, women they were not mechuyev to bring the half a shekel. But if a woman did something for which she's chayiv achatas, she would bring it just like a man. A korbanos that you have by your letters. There were certain korbanos that were always only brought by women. So here we see the importance for men also, or men and women equally, to say the korbanos every single day. Let's go back to Tanach Rabbanon. Anshe Maimed.
Sorry, yes. Quick question. Don't the tefillot, didn't the daily tefillot take the place of korbanot?
So what morning. We are learning right now, yes and no. So what we see here in Chazal, that reading the Seder korbanos, that's segula. So to say that why, aside of the few years after Gedalia ben Achikam's murder, those 52 years, Yidden were always in Yerushalayim, Yidden were always in Israel, even during Golus. In what merit? In the merit of us saying the Seder HaKorbanos. That's what we're learning here. Okay, Tanach Rabbanon, Anshe Mishmar, I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say before. The Anshe Mishmar means, Chavra, the Maimed that was in Yerushalayim. Anshe Mishmar. So this is part of their service as they are in the Beis HaMikdash. They would have a special additional prayer asking of God that the korbanos should be accepted with the Ratzon Hashem. The Anshe Maimad, you see, here you got Anshe Maimad. Again, this is part of the 24 Ma'amados, but these are the Yisraelim that did not go to Yerushalayim. But they wouldn't do nothing. They're part of that group. They were miskansil beis hakneses in their cities. And they were the ones, when the Mishnah spoke about fasting, wasn't that the ones that were in Yerushalayim? They did not fast. The fasting was done by the ones that are maimed, that stood in their cities. The yoshvim dalit chayniyos, like we mentioned, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. B'sheni, b'shabbos, b'shlishi, b'revi'u, b'chamishi. And aside of the Torah reading that we learned about on the Mishnah, here we're learning another tefillah. So it's interesting. The Mishmar means the Yisraelim that were in the Beis HaMikdash, they daven b'chlal on the korban achayim that she's kalu b'ratzah. The ones that are in their cities, they would specifically make a prayer whenever they did their special Maimed service. Look at this, Al Yordei Hayam. Why is that? Rashi explains each one since the second day of creation, and there is the Kriyas HaTorah connected to the creation. What happened? God created the waters, the division of the waters, so they made a special tefillah for those people who are traveling on the sea. Bashlishi, on the third day, they would also add a special prayer, Al Hoilchei Midbarais. Why? Because on the third day, we read in the Chumash, this Seira'eh Hayabasha. So we speak about, the separation of the water and the sea, and now we have an option of people traveling, especially traveling through the desert is dangerous. But interestingly, they made a special tefillah al askerom, shalei people al tinoikas. This askerom, I forgot the name that Dr. Baruch gave us, that the throat becomes inflamed, and ultimately, God forbid, the person is unable to breathe. They would
diphtheria. Diphtheria.
Diphtheria, more or less.
I
Danny's not able to correct me. Good. So they daven on that for Wednesday. And in the detail that normally that was an illness to which children were more susceptible to. So they davened. Why ask it? Just let me read aside Rashi. Says Rashi, because since Shaboy Nitlu Hamoiris, on Wednesday, God, so to say, affixed the heavenly bodies in their orbits, in their sky, in their Galgalim, and the Torah writes, Yihi Mo'oiros, but when Mo'oiros means luminaries, but when Hashem wrote the word luminaries in the Chumash, it's written without the vavs, which allows you, al pi drush, to read it me'eras. Me'eras means a curse. Interestingly, what did we learn? We just learned on Daf Chaf Aleph, right? We learned on Daf Chaf Aleph that Tuesday nights was the night that Igras Vas Machalas. Remember that? That came from Psachim. That demon would wander out. There's a certain potential not good connected to Wednesday. And that's why they daven specifically with this type of curse, that it should not happen. Back in the Gemara, B'chamishi, on Thursday, part of their Maimed service was to add a prayer for al-ubares uminikas, for women that are pregnant and nursing women. Ubares, shalayapilu, that women that are pregnant should, God forbid, not miscarry. Menikos, that they should succeed. Sheyeniku as benem, in those days before we had formula, if a woman was unable to nurse, many times, God forbid, that will be the end of the child. Now, why did they do that on Thursdays? Says Rashi, again, I'm going back to Rashi, because since it says on Thursday, Yishtutsu Hamayim Sheretz Nefesh Chaya, even though it's not speaking about human beings, but since there is a special bracha about multiplying, so that was Thursday's connection to, again, Ubaris and Menikos, back inside the Gemara, and Ube'erev Shabbos, Loi Hoyim Esanim, they did not fast. Why? Mepnei Kavayda Shabbos. And Kal V'chomer b'Shabbos Atzma, because there's a mitzvah, Medivrei Chachamim, Medivrei Kabbalah, right? V'karas ala Shabbos oineg Shabbos. If you have the meal Friday night after fasting the whole Friday, you won't have oineg. Either you're going to be starving or you're going to overeat, and probably both. So that's why. And I know there are exceptions. We spoke about Asara B'Tevis. Nowadays, if it falls on Friday, that's the exception. And right now, actually, according to some, when Asara B'Tevis could have fallen out on Shabbos, you would even fast on Shabbos. It's connected because if there's competing values, sometimes we go over the Oynik Shabbos. Otherwise, we don't. So that's clear. What's not clear from we learned the Mishnah is I get it on Friday, but the Echad Shabbos might come aloi. Answers the Gemara. Oh, Rabbi Yechanan. Answer number one: Mipnei HaNoitzrim. Noitzrim are the Christians. I would like to turn to the back over here. Let's go to the Marsha, because the Marsha who quotes Rashi doesn't like Rashi. I'm going to read Rashi straight from the Marsha over here. So Rashi's version was Mepnei Hagililim. It means the Christians. Now they have their holiday on Sunday, Kiyadua. So Rashi writes, he quotes Rashi, that why don't we fast on Sunday? Not to fast on the day that the Christians celebrate their holiday. They might take offense that they're making it into God's day and we are fasting on that day. Says the Marsha, I don't accept that. Because they'll have Taanis on us. No, because since what we are learning now also was during the times of the Beis HaMikdash. During the times of the Beis HaMikdash, what are we concerned about? Whether the Goyim will be upset with us, whether we're fasting on Sundays or not. Elo says the Marsha, not like Rashi. Even though it's not written in our Mishnah, but aside of what we are learning about, that the ones that were outside Yerushalayim fasted and they gathered together and there were special prayers. There's another din, and you know what that is? Is that the people who are standing in Maimed, Mishmar Maimed, Yisraelim, did not go to work. We did not want for anyone to think, imagine, that we are not working on Sunday. That's how important it is for us not to be b'chlal like the Goyim. They don't work on Sunday, we are going to work on Sunday. Gewaldig. V'chuli, keep on reading over there inside the Marsha, back inside our Gemara. So that's answer number one. Answer number two, Rav Shmuel, Bar Nachmeni Omar, B'pnei shehu shlishi liyitzira. Another amazing concepts we're learning. What shlishi liyitzira? God created man on Friday. And there's a rule. We have that by Bayoim Hashlishi, Bihi Yoisam Koyavim, by Shimon and Levi, by the story of Shechem. that on the third day from any traumatic experience, there is a unique weakness. So forever, he writes that since we were created on Friday. How's that a traumatic experience? It's traumatic. We came out of the earth. It was a trauma. So Rashi reads, "Ubachol yoyim shlishi." Every third day there's a chalishus, which means that forever the human being is the weakest on Sunday. So don't fast on Sunday. Now, of course, the other halachic fast days we do on Sunday.
Wait, the third day's, why is the third day Sunday?
Because Friday, Shabbos,
you count
Sunday,
Friday.
that's the way we count it. It doesn't have to be full 72 hours.
Got it.
But on the third day of, amazing. Wow. Answer number 3, because since on Shabbos we are given a neshama yisera, right? Rosh Hashanah to Zion, I think. And this special neshama is taken away from us by Motzei Shabbos. And how do we know that? Because since it says Shabbos by Nafash, literally it means by Nafash refers to Shabbos itself, that the God rested and he was, in literal taichus, he was refreshed. But the drasha is that Kiven Shabbos, not during Shabbos. Once Shabbos goes away, Vayinafash is a compilation of the words Vay, like Oy vey, of the Nefesh, I lost my soul. So here again, the same concept. Since there is a trauma that we all experience every Motzei Shabbos because we lost our soul, Reish Lakish says, so don't fast the next day. Don't fast Sunday. How great is that? Now, that's right. Says the Gemara that by Yom Rishon, what do we read? You know what? I think we'll stop over here. And we will continue, God willing, in the next class.
Rabbi, your the focus was going in and out a little bit.
I have to fix a light bulb, and also you should know that your voice came in as a little bit scratchy.
My headset is damaged. I have to get a new headset. Right.
Okay. So guys, I'm coming back in a second. There's a light here that
let me announce it to everybody. I'm going to announce it on the chat again.
But Kevin, don't forget that Daf Chav Ches really is for Monday. Daf Chav Ches is from, doesn't matter.
No, for those who want to do it live.
Ask Hassan to take Chav Zayin now and to put it up. So tomorrow morning, people should have the 2 Daf. Guys, I'm back in a minute. Mamash in a minute. All right. All right, I think I'm ready.
Rabbi, I'm running, but I'm listening. So if you don't see me, I'm still here.
I got Levon over here. It's good.
Good, great.
Just be interactive if you want. It helps.
I will be. Thanks, Rabbi.
To Levon also.
Yes.
With the help of Hashem, we are learning Taanis Daf Koyach Daf Chav Ches. We left off on Daf Chav Zayin Amid base 13 lines before the bottom of the Amid by the 2 dots where the Gemara is referring back to the Mishnah. now that we explained why we read Ma'aseh Bereishis during the Ma'amodois special service gatherings that happened in their local cities, and we read through the days of creation. The Mishnah spoke how on Sunday they would read Sunday and Monday. On Monday they would read Monday and Tuesday, etc., etc. And we're going to begin by discussing the challenge. And we spoke it already out in the Mishnah when we learned on Daf Chavav, that if you open up a Chumash and you will count, you will see that the first day of creation has 5 verses. The second day of creation has 3 psukim. Total of 8 psukim. Whenever the Torah is read, the rule that we will learn soon in Megillah is you have to call up at least 3 people. Each one has to read at least 3 verses. Really, we do 10 now. But let's go even to the 9. There's only 8 psukim. You don't have 9 psukim. So we're going to see, and the Mishnah spoke it out. And the Mishnah says that therefore they would divide the larger of the 2 days into 2, and the smaller one would be read for 1. But so what? The first day cannot be divided into 2 because there's only 5 verses. So how do you resolve that problem? We will learn now a very important machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. The words are, Rav says doilik, Shmuel says poisik. The word doilik means the reader goes back. Mamish, what we do now on Rosh Chodesh, the Kohen gets 3 verses, and the Levi, we go back. The Levi goes back, we reread the last verse that was read in the prior reading. Shmuel does not subscribe to the concept of rereading. Shmuel says paisik. Paisik means you take a verse and you cut it into 2. So from the 5 verses, the middle pasuk happens to be Vayomer Elokim Yehi Oid, Vayehi Oid. So the first one reads Vayomer Elokim Yehi Oid, and the second person reading the Torah begins in middle of the 3rd verse, Vayehi Oid. And that counts for verse number 1 of the 3 psukim. So we're going to learn a lot about the Rav and Shmuel. We will go back. I would like to read as we get into today's sugya. I'm going to go back to Daf Chavav, and I'm going to reread the part of the Mishnah that records that machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yeshua. I want to reread it and learn it properly. But Rashi, the nakuda is that this special gathering that is done by the Anshe Maimod, that they would read the Torah and then they would make special tefillos. They didn't always do it. What the Mishnah told us is that whenever there were other responsibilities in which they would have to pick and choose between making the special Maimod gathering or doing that other responsibility, the other took precedence. And what we learned, L'Kula Alma, is every day that Hallel is said, we're not speaking about Rosh Chodesh, we'll get back to that, God willing, on Daf Chavtes. But when you're obligated to say the entire Hallel, but let's just leave the word vague. When Hallel was recited, no Maimid service was done during Shachris. And as we spoke out on last year, and again, we'll read it in Rashi again soon on Daf Chavav Amud Aleph, that don't think that the Kehanim were only that the Yisraelim from the Maimid or from the Mishmar were only standing to observe. They were also asked to help. Rashi writes in the Mishnah on Daf Chavav that they needed to carry wood, they needed to carry water. No, they were hands-on. So since there was hands-on, and on top of that, they have to say Hallel, they would not have time to also have their special Maimid service. Then the Mishnah went on to speak about when their Korban Musaf was brought. Korban Musaf demanded many animals, which means they had even more work to do. So they were exempt of the Maimid service. And then there was a nuance of a difference. When did they not do the Maimid service? The Mishnah spoke about if there's Musaf, they don't do it by Mincha, they don't even do it by Ne'ilah. We're going to go back to that and clarify the machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yeshua. And the Mishnah then went on to enumerate the 9 special holidays connected to the Korban Eitzim. And the words that we left for the Gemara is that there were a group of people called Goinvei Eli. They were pestle smugglers. They were B'nei Koitzei Ketziyos. We're going to interpret certain words in the Mishnah in today's daf and Chevra much, much more. So again, let's go to Daf Chav Zayin Amid Beis, 13 lines before the bottom of the Amid, referring back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that by Yom HaRishon, even though they only fasted Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but they would make gatherings and do the other parts even Sunday and Friday, including the reading of the Torah. What did they read on Sunday? The 2 days of creation, Bereshis and Yehirakiyah. So Tana, we learned in a Braisa, again, we have to call at least 3 people, and they called 3, not more. So whichever one of the days of creation had more verses, that was the one that was divided into 2. And the smaller of the two was read by one. So when it comes to the first day has 5 verses. The second day only has 3. So Bereish is Bishnayim, and Yehirokia, which is the opening of the creation of the second day, is Be'echad, is only read by one person. I know today we say we call up one person. Then whoever was called up actually did the reading. So Frag the Gemara Bishlam, day number 2, Yehirokia, it works that it's read by one person, Be'echad, Farvas. Because again, as we will learn in Megillah, the minimum amount of verses that have to be read, not less, is 3. Perfect. The Hirokia, second day, is Tulosip Sukahav. Elofrek, the Gemara Bereish is, how can we say Mishnayim, whether the gear says Maitama or we take it out, doesn't work. Because count and you will see that Hey Psukahavin, it's 8 Psukim. And let's go with the parentheses, and we learn a Mishnah in Megillah that are Koren Publisher, Aliyah, Chais Megillah Psukim. So how do you get 2 people in 5 Psukim? Rav says doileg. Doileg means, I know literally people say doileg means to jump. It means you jump backwards. You reread verse number 3. Is the last verse of the Kohen. Let's word it that way. And the first pasuk for the Levi. Shmuel Amar Poisek. Poisek means you cut it in half. You cut it in half. It's a very small pasuk. And according to Rashi Chumash, the pshat is that's actually the first act of creation that's recorded. But Rashi teaches that when Bereshis bara likim is that when God was creating the heavens and the earth and there was chaos, etc., what happened? So again, is said at the end for the Kohen. You stop in the middle of the verse, and then the Levi begins with the words Vayehi Oir. And now the Gemara will explain why each one doesn't agree with the other one. So Rav says, Doileg, my tamaloi oimar, loy omar poisek. He gives a very simple answer. Rav says, Kosovar, Kopsuka, loy paske, Moshe, not loy paskin, loy. If Moshe Rabbeinu did not divide that verse into 2, how do we have the right to cut it into half? We don't. Now that's like a problem. Now, Shmuel Oimer, Shmuel is the one that says, Shmuel Amar, that you're poisek. How can he say that to me paskinon? Don't we know Rab Chanina, the Cheder teacher? He was the master teacher of Psukim to children in Cheder. And now the way he taught was not that he said a word and he interpreted. He would try, ideally, to say an entire verse. But it didn't work. The children had a hard time saying the whole verse and then interpreting it. So he wanted to get permission according to the capacity of the child when the children are even younger to do what we do nowadays. Right? But he's cutting the pasuk in half. And Rab Chanina says, Rab Chanina the teacher, he went to Rab Chanina the Great to get a header, and he only, with a lot of pain, he gave him a header. The only reason why he allowed me, while I'm teaching psukim to children, to cut a pasuk in half is that means we have to teach them. So when you teach, you got to make it easier for the student, not harder for the student. But if not for that, we ideally never cut a pasuk into half. So Shmuel says that's not a problem. I don't have a problem. Because at the end of the day, he got the header. Whenever you don't have an option, whenever there isn't a better option, you cut the pasuk in half. So just like when it comes to teaching students, to make it easier for them to learn the pasuk, you can cut a pasuk in half. Here, there's also no other option. Hassan, now the Gemara will explain why lo yafshir. Why doesn't Shmuel say that you're doilig? He holds doilig as a non-option. The only option is Paisik. If there's no other option, then yes, we are allowed to cut a pasuk in half. Now, Shmuel, Ayman, Paisik, Taka, why doesn't he say doilik? Why isn't doilik an answer, an option? Answers the Gemara, how great. Don't think that only in your shul people come late. Don't think that only in your shul people leave early. That always happened. And the people that are going to come in late, the latecomers or the early leavers, might make a huge mistake. Let's read Masu Kedvash, the words of Rashi. Let's go on the 4th line before the bottom of the Amid. Hayotzim, the people that leave early, what's going to happen? Im Sheni Doileg Umaschel B'Pasik Shesiyim Boyarishayin B'nei Adam Hanachnasim Shalei Shamu Kriyas Arishayin. Imagine you come, you're the latecomer. You come late to shul, and you come there by the second Aliyah, and you see the second Aliyah began by Yom Elokim Yihi Ord by Yihi Ord. You're going to say that's the beginning of Levi. You're going to count back, and you're going to see prior to that there's only 2 psukim Bereshis, and v'ha'aretz ha'isod toyu b'voyu. So you're going to think that the first reader only read 2 psukim, and you're going to come with the conclusion, but the average can only read 2 psukim. You may never read only 2 psukim. That is the churva that will come from the people, right? That enter the nachnasa means late comers. The late comer will think that the first aliyah was only 2 psukim. Similarly, Rashi says weiter that when you have people that will leave early, when the people that leave early, the first one read 3 psukim, that's according to Rav, and you leave, you're going to count. You take a left, you're going to see there's only 2 psukim left from Yom HaRishon. There's only 3 psukim left for Yom HaSheni. You're going to think, well, if there's only 2 psukim left regarding the first day of creation, then he's only going to read those 2 psukim. You will again make that mistake. Now, who asked you to leave early? Who asked you to come late? But we are concerned. We are concerned for us never to give the impression that we are calling and reading less than 3 psukim. And that's why Shmuel does not subscribe to doileg. Gavaldik now asks Gemara Kasha from a Braisa, both against Rav and against Shmuel. How great is this? Meisvei, it says in a Braisa, Parsha shel Shisha Psukim Koren Reisa Mishnayim. This is a rule, and we're going to learn more details about this in Megillah. That when you have a Parsha that only is comprised of 6 psukim, that's great. That can be divided amongst 2 people. But if you have a Parsha in the Torah is not what we call a chapter. The Parsha in the Torah is where you have the rest of the line is opened. That's called a parsha psucha. A parsha sasuma is where you have in the Sefer Torah 9 letters that are empty, and the next parsha begins on the same line. It's more complex than that, but that's a general good statement of parsha psucha, parsha sasuma. Be that as it may, if you have an entire parsha that's comprised of 5 psukim, says the Braisa like this: that shel chamisha really biyachid. Let's read the brackets. It should be read by 1 person. But ve'im harishon koyre gimul, if 1 person read the first 3, hasheni koyre shnayim miparshazu, no paisik, no doilik. The second one will read the final 2, and he's going to read 1 of the next one. So a full new 3 psukim should be read, or v'yesh oimnim, that it's not, you only read 2 from the first parsha. There's no doilik, there's no paisik. But we don't want you to read only 1 of the new parsha. We want for you to read at least 3 psukim in the subsequent parsha. The Yeshoim Gimel, why? Again, Rashi explains, because someone might walk into shul late, in middle of a kriya, even though the Balkoida already read 2 psukim of the prior parsha, he didn't hear it, he walked in late, he's a latecomer. He will presume that the Balkoida began in this parsha, and he only read 1 pasuk. Who cares about the latecomers? We care about latecomers, and we care about what they say, and we don't want to give them the wrong impression. So this shita holds that you have to read 3 psukim in the parsha. So here clearly you see this is a kasha on both. Kasha on Rav, reflecting on the right that the Laman, the Amar Doiluk, according to Rav Lidloik, take the parsha of 5 and you read it for 2, read 3, and then go back the way we do Rosh Chodesh. And the Laman, the Amar Poisek, same kasha. Why do we have to go into a new parsha? Answers the Gemara right at the end of Chav Zayin Amud Beis, a Gavaldike answer that Shana Hassan, the Braisa has nothing to do with our sugya. Top of Daf Chav Ches, because the is lay Ravcha. No one holds, not Rav and not Shmuel hold that it's ideal to do doileg or paisik. The only problem is if you don't have any other option. So since in our case, by the Ma'amodos, Sunday you read the first and second day of creation. You only have 8 verses. You don't go into the 3rd day. So when there's no other option, either paisik or doilig. Verstehst? The Braisa that we just quoted is speaking b'chlal. We don't have to squeeze it in. If you don't have to squeeze it in, if you have Ravcha, if there's no reason why you should not be allowed to keep on going, there it makes sense to keep on going with all the details that we have in the Braisa. And by the way, that answers Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh, we read the parsha of Rosh Chodesh. And when we will learn the Sugya and Megillah, we will see that we're supposed to call 4 people on Rosh Chodesh. And there has to be a rhyme and a reason. We'll speak more about that later. But whenever you're limited and you have to read from here until there, that is where, if there's no other option, Paisik or Doilig, Gavaldik. And that has nothing to do with this brisa where you can read another parsha. Okay. Chavra, top line on Daf Chav Ches says the Mishnah, referring back to the Mishnah. Parsha Gedoyla Koyda Meisa Mishnayim. When now we go B'Shachris Ube Musaf Ube Mincha Koydem Al PM. When you read the Mishnah, we read it correctly, but it's not clear where do you put the comma. During which of the prayers would they read it out of the Chumash, and during which of the prayers would they say it by heart? Clearly, Shachris, they would read it from a Chumash. Clearly, by Mincha, they would read it Al Peh. The uncertainty is the word Musaf. Do you put Musaf with Shachris, or do you put Musaf with Mincha? So and the Ne'ilah? Let's see if there's Ne'ilah. They asked in the yeshiva, do we read B'Shachris Uba Musaf Koyden Noisam Sefer, and it's only by Mincha that you read it Baal Peh, or a Dilma that Musaf goes with Mincha? Hachikam B'Shachris, you read it outside the Sefer, from inside. You read it from the Sefer. Kama Uba Musaf Uba Mincha. Then Koyden Noisa Al Peh Koyden Es Hashema. So says the Gemara. Look inside the Brisa. That's more elaborate. The Tanya B'Shachris Uba Musaf Nechnasim LeBeis HaKnesses. We're speaking here in Hebron about the Maimad people standing in their localities, fasting also 4 of the days of the week, and they would read it Koyden Kederech Shekoyden Oisa Kol Hashana. How do we read Torah the whole year? From inside a Sefer Torah. Uba Mincha. Now listen to these words, a detail we didn't have in the Mishnah. Yachid Koyra Oisa Al Peh. One, it sounds like one reads it for all, but only by heart. No. If it has to be read, if you're reading it out of the Sefer Torah, one can read for all. But if you're reading it Baal Peh, no one is debating that Musaf and Mincha, it's read Baal Peh. I'm sorry. Musaf is read inside. Mincha, it's read Al Peh. Ela kulam nechnasim, people enter, they have to enter the shul. The koyden oisam Baal Peh, everyone has to read that day. Sunday, Monday, V'choli. Every day you read 2 days of the creation, Al Peh, as they read the Shema, which is read by every individual, but it's read Al Peh. What I would like to do is, before we go into the Gemara, that's going to get into greater detail, I want to read back the Mishnah. Let's go back over here to Daf Chav Vav Amud Aleph, and I'm going to read the Mishnah. Right by the dot. Just to have clarity again, after the Mishnah spoke about some of the Maimad service, the Mishnah also spoke about certain days where at certain prayers there was no Maimad service. So I want to read it inside the Mishnah. Kol Yom Sheyesh B'Y Hallel, every day that there is Hallel. Again, we're going to learn more on that Chavtes about the Hallel. Aim, the Bach adds Boy, Maimad, the Shachris. There wasn't a special Maimad service during Shachris. Why? Because since they have to say Hallel, there isn't time for both. Hallel takes precedence. Next line in the Mishnah here is where we begin with the Machlokes. Whenever there was a Korban Musaf, says the Tanach, says Rabbi Akiva, Ein Bane'ilah. Now let me clarify what that means. So look inside the Rashi, 6 lines under the Mishnah, 6 lines in the wide lines. Korban Musaf, Zok Rashi, Yoim Sheyesh by Korban Musaf B'Yerushalayim. Ein Maimed B'Ne'ilah B'Yerushalayim. The ones, this omission of the service, B'chlal L'Shitas Rashi, is only for the ones that are standing in Yerushalayim. And when it says that they don't do the special Maimed service in Ne'ilah, this is very important. It doesn't only mean Ne'ilah. We didn't say this when we learned the Mishnah. It means not only will they not say it in Mincha, which is closer to Musaf, but they won't even say it in the Elah. Now, what about Musaf proper? We're not mentioning it. The Gemara is going to clarify. For sure not in Musaf. They would not do the Maimad service by Musaf. They would not do it during Mincha. Why not? Because Mincha is close to Musaf. And according to Rabbi Akiva's original position, you don't even do it if there is a day of Ne'ilah. Why? Rashi explains. Because since Tamid is only one. Musaf, right? There is no Musaf without 2 animals. Why wouldn't the Yisraelim have time? Says Rashi, Shahakoyanim Shel Maimad. Then Shitas Rashi, the Maimad wasn't only It was Kohanim L'Yisraelim, Terudim, the Kohanim are Terudim and Musaf. They're busy doing the carbon. The Yisrael Shebahem Hayaterudim Lachtoiv Eitzim Velishoiv Mayim, all of the auxiliary help that was needed for the Karbanis was thrown on the Yisraelim over there that were doing the Maim of the Mishnah. And therefore, according to the original sheet of Rabbi Akiva, it's doiche even the Maimid by Ne'ilah, certainly by Mincha. Now we understand the Mishnah better. I just want to keep on reading the Mishnah. Carbonates, during the carbonates, that means during those 9 days, the ones that were involved in the carbonates, ein bamincha. Right? These are the words of Rabbi Akiva, to which Ben Azai tells him that kachoy Rabbi Yeshua shoyna. This is the way Rabbi Yeshua had it different. When there is carbon musaf, again, we're going to see today, right now, for sure they didn't do the Maimon service during musaf, and also they didn't have to do it by mincha, but they would have to do it by ne'ilah. Carbon eitzim, that is where they wouldn't even do it by ne'ilah. But your average musaf did not also push away the service by ne'ilah. So it's the big machloikas between the original Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yeshua. The way we learned in Rashi is that when there's a carbon musaf, everyone agrees that you don't do the Maimon service during mincha. We will see soon in the Gemara, it goes without saying you don't do it by musaf. Question is, Rabbi Akiva held that you don't even do it in the Ilah. Rabbi Yeshua says that's too much. They only are exempt of the next prayer, the one closest to the additional karbanis, not to the one that's even one step away, only to the closest carbon. And again, the Mishnah says that ultimately, Chazal Rabbi Akiva agreed to the shita of Rabbi Yeshua. Let's turn back. Okay, we are on Daf Chav Ches, and now let's go back. Let's go back to the Gemara's analysis of the Mishnah. So it says in the Mishnah, Kol Yom Sheish Bei Halal, there wasn't a Maimon service during Shachris, because we learned in the previous Masechta that Halal is said during Shachris. All right, but the big machlokes will be between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yeshua, as we just explained, is when there is a carbon musaf. Does the exemption to have the special Maimid service gathering, is it only by mincha, or even also originally let Rabbi Akiva by ne'ilah? Ma hefresh bein zeh lo zeh. What difference is there? In other words, if when it comes to Halal only exempted them from Shachris. Right? Sorry, the Mishnah is referring to carbon eitzim. I take it back. By carbon eitzim, even Rabbi Yeshua was moide that there's no avoida by ne'ilah. The question of the Gemara is l'shitas Rabbi Yeshua, that when there's a carbon eitzim mincha, you have to say by mincha. It's not even. It's only ne'ilah. Ne'ilah is exempt. Mincha is not exempt. The carbon eitzim should exempt you also from mincha. That's the kash. Why didn't the carbon eitzim also allow us to push off the Maimid service during mincha? Answers the Gemara. These are very powerful words. Halalu mincha is divrei Torah. Divrei Torah means at its source in the Chumash. Yitzchak lo suach basada. Alluded to in the Chumash, midivrei Torah. V'halalu ne'ilah is completely of rabbinic origin. Is midivrei Soifim. Now, even though my friends, don't confuse, we're not speaking about the prayer of mincha. We're not speaking about the prayer of ne'ilah. We're speaking here about the Maimid service that was done at that time. Doesn't matter. Maimid service that's connected to mincha, since mincha is midivrei Torah. Therefore, Rabbi Yeshua holds that when there's a carbon eitzim, they made the Maimid service by mincha. The only time that they were exempted, what were they exempted of? Only by ne'ilah. Gabaldik. Zman atzikana ba'am.
By the Ne'ilah Tefilla or the Maimid of Ne'ilah? I'm sorry.
By the Maimid of Ne'ilah. The exemption was for the Maimid of Ne'ilah.
Thank you.
Okay. So now the Mishnah, what's carbon eitzim? That's how the Mishnah spoke now about those 9 special dates, that even when the Beis HaMikdash was replenished with wood, those families had their special holiday celebration in which they brought not only wood, but again, they also brought karbanos, which Vaited explains, why there were more karbanos, why the people that were in service, including the Yisraelim, they were busier, which is why they had exemptions for this special Maimon service. Tana Rabbanim, Lamo Hutzrcha Loimer Zman Atzei Kehanim V'Ha'am. Says the Braisa Amru Kisha'alu that these days remained forever. It wasn't only that when we went up originally, when there was no wood, these families volunteered. This is what we spoke out by heart. That interestingly, even though that the Persians were very helpful in maintenance, but one thing we obviously did not have enough of was firewood. And these families stood to the occasion. They rose to the occasion. And therefore, as a reward, that in the future, even when the lishka, the chamber that has the wood, will have enough wood supply, you had the merit to donate once. Forever, that will be your day. They will donate it out of their own pocket on that day. Now again, when we learned the Mishnah, Danny was asking, originally on that day, they gave a tremendous amount of wood. They gave enough wood to last until the next date. Here, subsequently, they didn't give that amount. It wasn't about like, wow, you gave $1 million, so I'm going to reward you every year on the same date. Yeah, you're going to give the same amount of money. That's asking maybe too much. They gave a small amount of wood. They brought one carbon. It wasn't financially hurting for them at all. It was a merit. It was a promotion that we gave them. It was a kavod that we gave them. Shenamar, as it says, and this is the pasuk in Nehemiah, that the Hagoyrolos he palnu ar karbon ha'etzam hakan aleim va'am, right? Lahavi lebeis elekenu, lebeis avisenu leitim lizumanim shana b'shana. And l'chayda the goydel is that all of the 9 families l'chayda stood up at once. Question is, which one gave first? So they made a lottery. And what was that? And it says clearly in Nehemiah that they were given that covet forever, shana b'shana. Levair al misbach Hashem elekenu. In order for their donation every year to be used, that wood was used to be burnt on the Mizbeach, as it's written in the Torah that there has to be always wood on the Mizbeach. Okay. And the Imohem, Kohanim, Uleviam, V'cholmi, etc. So what the Mishnah spoke out was, again, the 2 words that were not clear was the Goin Ve'eli U'bnei Koitze Ketziyos. Because as the Mishnah is enumerating all of the 9 holidays, so on the 15th, who joined the 15th of Menachem Av were also the families of the pestle smugglers, the families of the fig cutters. Pashat Pshat, what does that mean? So says the Gemara, Hamachaz Gozra Hamalchus Gezer al Yisrael. There was a decree. Again, a big machlokes here in the Rishonim. Which government made the decree? Was it the Yevanim? Was it another government? But what was the Gzeda? They obviously, that government at that time did not have the power to stop temple service, which they wanted to do. But there were 2 avodas that brought about tremendous amount of joy. And these were moments in where people would bring something from outside the temple. They would bring it into the temple. You understand? So they would bring wood. They would bring the bikurim with the whole trask. So they had the koyach to stop them from bringing it. And how did they stop them? That they set up soldiers, pasha to stand on the highways. Mamish the way during the times of the first Beis Hamikdash, when he made the real breakaway. And he didn't want for the Yidden of the other Shvatim of the 10 Shvatim Bechlal, Rahman al-Islam, not to go to the Beis Hamikdash. So one of the ways he prevented it is that he built temple replicas, ultimately in the north, that were that was prohibited. On top of that, he set up soldiers, not allowing Yidden to go to Yerushalayim, and that was repeated over here. Just like Yerav ben Nevat put up sentries, not allowing Yidden to go to the Beis Hamikdash. This government, let's say it was during the second Beis Hamikdash era, they set up these pidrois da'ois. So ma osuk shedim. Now here you have in the parentheses, we'll see soon why there is different versions. But what did they do to circumvent it? They were genius. They were bringing bikurim, but they camouflaged it. How did they camouflage it? That unatlun, the Eli al kisveim, that they carried the baskets of bikurim together with a pestle. right? That is used in a mortar. The Kivin Shigia Eitzel Pirois Dois, when they came near these police officers and they were stopped and they were asked, Lehechan Ato Olchen, to which they responded, no, we have pestles. We are going to make to make figs. The way they would make figs is that they would dry out the figs, right? For that, they would use a pestle, and then they would squeeze many figs together, and they would make a gulei de vela, which was a common thing, right? We learned this in Bava Metzia and Eila Metzias. We are here simply only to make lasa shnei gulei de vela, and for that we have to. We're going because we have the pestle, but we don't have the mortar. So in that nearby, there's mortars, and you look at and they showed them the figs, they showed them the pestle, and the trick worked. Belelli, and we're going the machteshes, the mortar we don't have here. It's part of the machinery that's needed. We have to go to, but we Belelli shal kasfenu, but we are already carrying the pestle. So when they saw figs and they saw pestle, the narrative fit. And they allowed them to pass. And the moment they passed, Itrum Besalim, they decorated the baskets properly as we always did. And we brought them into Yerushalayim with the greatest joy as we were able to at the times. That was, those families were rewarded for them making the effort and succeeding in continuing the avoid of the Bikurim, that they joined that holiday of carbonates. That's the Goin Ve'eli. What is the Koitzikitziois? Says the next Braisa Tana that Hein b'nei Salmoi Hanit Toifasi, that this is what was done by the family of Salmoi that came from the area of Nitoifasi. The Tana Rabbanan Mahim b'nei Salmoi Nitoifasi Amru again Pamach as Gazra Hamalchus Gazed Al Yisrael Shlo Yaviu Eitzim Amaracha. Again, no wood can be brought into the Beis Hamikdash complex. Wood that's needed for the avoid of the karbanos, and again, because when we would bring the wood, it would be done very joyously. They wanted to stop the joy in serving God, and they did it. In his day, so here you see the words are a little bit different. That's the girsa before. Right, according to what's written in the parentheses above, it's ma'asu kshedim sheba'oisador v'yirechet. So there's a difference, or there's no difference. But great people, what did they do? So again, they tricked those centuries. They brought the wood that's going to be donated, but they build them into ladders, va'asu sulamais, and they put the ladders on their shoulders, and they walked by the highways, and they were stopped by these guards. These guards asked the Jews carrying these ladders, where are you going? So they told him, we're going. He says, we have a duff coat, and we have to get the pigeons, and we need to have ladders. And they showed them the ladders. And that the narrative fit. They had the ladders, they thought they're going to chop birds. Once we left the area of these guards, we dismantled the ladders, and we brought them and regarding such people, there was a risk factor. Many of these times there was real religious persecution. It wasn't that you're going to get a fine. You can go into jail or worse. And regarding Rav ben Avat, the meaning these governments and these centuries, that they were trying to stop temple service, may the name of the wicked rot. And you know what's good? That we don't even know exactly what era they are. Sometimes it's better that way. No zecher regarding who they were. And now let's continue.
It mentions Yeram ben Avad quite a few times, and it repeats it again.
So that's the big question. How can you say Vishem Yishem Yirkav when we write the name?
They keep saying it right.
Correct. Okay, that's a big question. So on the 20th, if you want to get clear, not to get confused, you have to go back and forth. In the Mishnah, we began with the 20th of Tammuz, but this is the 20th of Av. 20th of Av, who forever had the schus of offering the Karban Eitzim, it was Pachas Moyev. Now don't forget, Moyev are one of the nations from which we may not even take male converts. So who's Pachas Moyev? And Nach Ben Yehuda. They're from the tribe of Yehuda. So who were they? So here we're going to learn a Machlokes Tanoim. Tana we learned in the Braisa, Bnei Pachas Moyev Ben Yehuda is Bnei David Ben Yehuda. That's the family. These are the words of Rav Meir. Rabbi Yossi says, no, Pachas Moav is Ben Yehuda is Yoav ben Tzeruya. By the way, Tzeruya, the father of the great general Yoav, was David HaMelech's sister. No, they're called Pachas Moav because they both come from Rus, who was a Moabite woman from whom we are allowed to take converts because the halacha l'Moshe Sinai, as we learned, was Moav v'lo Moavis, right? And that was the confusion that they had at that time. Okay, so let's remember this machloikas. In other words, we have a machloikas Rav Meir and Rabbi Yossi as to which family brought the Korban Eitzim on the 20th of Av. Be'esrim be'elul ben Adin, or B'nai Adin ben Yehuda. Here again, who were B'nai Adin? The word Adin means Edel. So Tana Rabbanan, B'nai Adin ben Yehuda, Hein, again, B'nai David ben Yehuda. Now we have a Rabbi Yehuda now. Rabbi Yehuda holds that B'nai Adin is B'nai David. Rabbi Yossi Oimar, who are this B'nai Adin, same family, but not from David, from his sister, from Tzeruya, B'nai Yoav ben Tzeruya. Then, when we came into the final date in the Mishnah, which was Be'echad B'Teva, is the Mishnah Daf Chavav, so we learned that Shavu, B'nai Parois, Shenia. And we learned in last year that they made a lottery. Okay, so, or maybe that was in this year. Point is that the Mishnah writes that which one of these 9 dates was a repeat, the only one is B'nai Parosh. It was the first time you look inside, if you look inside the Mishnah, you'll see that B'nai Parosh, they brought B'chamisha B'av. That was their first day. But now Be'echad B'Teves, and the first time around, we didn't have wood, so they were the ones that brought for the second time. It's mashma from the Mishnah that the only family that had a double holiday, Korban Eitzim, was this B'nai Parosh. And now you understand why we brought these 2 braisos above, because now we're going to have that L'cha'ura, this wasn't the only family that brought Shnia. So if that's the case, our Mishnah is authored by whom? Mani Masnisim, not Rav Meir, not Rabbi Yehuda, not Rabbi Yossi. Let's halt cup, because Rabbi Meir, Litane, Shavu, B'nai David, Ben Yehuda Shnia. B'nai David, Ben Yehuda should be the second time. In other words, B'nai David, it says, if you look in the Mishnah, you'll see that Be'esrim B'Tamuz was B'nai David Ben Yehuda. Clear. So the B'nai David brought it Be'esrim B'Tamuz. According to Rabbi Meir, what did we just learn? That Rabbi Meir holds that Pachas Moav is Be'esrim B'Av. It also means B'nai David. So according to him, B'nai David brought it twice. According to Rabbi Yehuda, so when it says B'nai David Ben Litani Shava B'nai David Ben Yehuda Shnia, why according to Rabbi Yehuda do you have B'nai David twice? Again, Be'esrim B'Tamuz, the Mishnah writes explicitly, it was B'nai David Ben Yehuda. We just learned that Rabbi Yehuda holds that Be'esrim Be'elul, B'nai Adin, Rabbi Yehuda says B'nai Adin is B'nai David. So the Mishnah should have said the same words like it writes by B'nai Parosh, the word Shania, because it's the same family a second time. So it can't be Rabbi. So you're going to say it's going to be Rabbi Yossi. But it doesn't work. Because according to Rabbi Yossi, Litni Shava B'nai Yoav Ben Tzeruya Shania. Because according to Rabbi Yossi, Be'esrim Ba'av, Pachas Moav, and Be'esrim Be'elul, they're both, according to Rabbi Yossi, they're both B'nai Yoav Ben Tzeruya. That's a Gavaldik Akash. So who's the author of the Mishnah? Gavaldik answers the Gemara. The author of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi. And yes, we learned 2 braisas. One says that Pachas Moav is Yoav. The other one says that Be'esrim Be'elul B'nai Adin is B'nai Yoav. Rabbi Yossi said one of the 2. There was a machloikis in the Tanoim, at the latter time of the Tanoim, which one was referring to Yoav ben Tzeruya. In other words, Rabbi Yossi but Rabbi Yehuda is saying that Mishpachas Yoav ben Tzeruya brought one of the 9 days. And there's a machloikis, which one is it? The Trei Tanoim, leave it to Rabbi Yossi. So according to Rabbi Yossi, the only family that had the schus of bringing Korban Eitzim twice in the year is Taka B'nai Parosh, which is why the Mishnah writes that Be'echad B'Teva is Gavaldi. B'nai Parosh Shenia, and those words are not written in any other place. How great is that? Let's go weiter. We're going to have some, we have a young student joining us, and that will be part of the joyous sounds that we will hear in a moment. So it says in the Mishnah that Be'echad B'Teva is Loy HaYamayimid. Why is that? As we explained, because now that we read the Mishnah. So whenever there's Hallel Chanukah, there's Hallel Sholim. So they didn't make the special Hallels, the special Maimon service during Shabbos. Whenever there is a Musaf, which again you have Be'echad B'Teves, then again you don't say that was the whole question. Machlekes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yeshua, how far in don't you say it? On top of that, even according to Rabbi Yeshua, whenever it's a day of Karban Eitzim, which is Be'echad B'Teves is a day of Karban Eitzim, you don't do the Maimon by Ne'ilah. Great. So the Mishnah said that Be'echad B'Teves, there was no Maimon service, not by Shachris. Now again, Musaf has to be clarified, not by Musaf and not by Mincha, not by Ne'ilah. Now, says the Gemara at the bottom, now guys, we already spoke this out. Let's learn a little bit into Daf Chav Ches Amud Beis. We're going to go a little bit into it. Again, the Mishnah never explicitly said that when Karban Musaf is brought, there was no Maimed service during Musaf. The Mishnah never said that. The Mishnah only said that regarding Halal, that whenever Halal is recited, and we know that Halal is said by Shachris, there was no Maimed service during Shachris. So Maishna the Halal, the Dachal the day. Now, Halal doesn't exempt them from the later Maimed services, but at least during the Tefilla in which there is Halal, we don't want to overburden either this or that. So we said Halal say and don't add that whole Tefilla that they say. When all of the service was not done. Umaishna Musaf, if you read the Mishnah, the machlek is that it looks like, and we read the Mishnah with Rashi. So either Karban Musaf exempts Mincha and Ne'ilah, original Rabbi Akiva, or right, Rabbi Yeshua holds it only exempts Mincha. The Mishnah never spoke about Musaf, which is mashma that Musaf the Liyadacha Didei. Look inside the second line in Rashi on the top. The Ktani Yom Sheyesh by Musaf Ein Boy. The Bach I think adds a base, the letter base. Ein Boy Bimincha, but V'loy Ktani Ein Boy Musaf. Mashma, it sounds like the third line in Rashi, the Leidacha Didei Ela the Mincha. Why? If Halal is Dacha Didei, why not Musaf? Amar Lei Ravashi. This is important. Says Ravashi, no, that's the pshat in the Mishnah is that it's for sure doicha musaf. And if you go back to Daf Chavav, Rashi says that there's no musaf that comes with less than 2 karbanis. There was too much work to be done. For sure, everyone agrees it's doicha musaf. Hashta, the lav, the day dachi, lokula alma, it even exempts a ma'amed service by the subsequent prayer, either only by the next one, or even also by ne'ilah. So there's no need to say that whenever there's Musaf, we suspend the Maimed services. And Amarle, the Gemara now clarifies, I knew that. My question, I knew that the Mishnah doesn't even have to mention it's Doicha Musaf. My question is that just like when there is Halal, the only Maimed service that's suspended, that's the word, is Shachris. Because Halal is said by Shachris, so you don't have to gather Maimed service by Shachris. Why is it that Musaf is different? That's my question. Even according to Rabbi Yeshua, not Rabbi Akiva, who later was Maida, it's according to now Musaf and Mincha. Why Musaf and Mincha? Only Musaf. Now, by the way, it is clear. I mean, there's a counter logic. Halal doesn't come with karbanos. Halal is Halal. They have to say Halal. The karbanos is where the Anshe Maimed / Mishmar really needed to do work. Right? Like Rashi says, they were the Choytvei Eitzim. They were the She'ave Mayim. All of the help, they were the hands. They were the helpers in the Beis HaMikdash. But still only B'doicha Musaf. So Amalei, we'll leave off in the Sugya, that Iker Rabbi Yosi, the Koy Kavasach, which is great. You're right. Your logic has a leg to stand on. And there is actually the Tana Rabbi Yosi, not the Tana of our Mishnah, and appreciate the genius of Ravina Ravashi. We just said that the author of our Mishnah regarding the 9 families, right, that the only one that's repeated twice was Be'echad B'Teves is Rabbi Yosi. And according to Rabbi Yosi, it's only Doicha. Good. And now we're bringing the other Shitas Rabbi Akiva, Shitas Rabbi Yeshua, that Iker Rabbi Yosi, the Koy Kavosach, that holds that it's only Doicha Musaf. Now, how do I know that only that according to Rabbi Yosi, the extra karbanos only suspended that gathering during that prayer? So it's not as if finished, but we'll read it inside. The Tanya said, Rabbi Yosi Omer, Kol Yoim, Sheyesh by Musaf, Yesh by Maimed. Now you have to appreciate these words. So Rabbi Yossi doesn't say clearly, but we're going to extrapolate from these words what Shitas Rabbi Yossi is. Kol Yoim, every day. Guys, every day, understand the word. Every day means even when there is carbonates. Even when there is carbonates. Every day that there's most of this going to be at least one maimed. Now, maimed the mic. What is Rabbi Yossi being machadish over here? Now, there is a Tanakama here. There is a Tanakama. I want to read inside the Rashi, 5th line from the top. Rabbi Yossi is making the statement against the Tanakama. And we are presuming, and it's going to stand this way, that the Tanakama in the Braisa is the original sheet of Rabbi Akiva. Tanakama, Paleg, the Omar, Yoim, Sheyesh, by Musaf. Ein by Ne'ilah. Ein by Ne'ilah means there isn't Maimed services by Ne'ilah. There isn't Maimed services by now. Who holds that? That's Rabbi Akiva, the original Rabbi Akiva. We already learned that Rashi in the Mishnah. Because when it says Ein Ne'ilah, it doesn't only mean Ne'ilah. It means not even by Ne'ilah. We also have now Ravashi. Ravashi says, for sure it's Doichetzon. On that says Rabbi Yossi that there is Maimed. Even though there's Musaf, there is Maimed. Now, what is he referring to? If he's referring to Maimed the Shachris, since this Rabbi Yossi is arguing with the Tanakama, he cannot be referring to Shachris. Because why would the Tanakama say that there's no Maimed in Shachris? Just because there's Musaf. We're not speaking about a day of Halal. This is a day that there's Musaf. Hi Tanakama, Nami Hachi Kamar. What? The Tanakama also agrees that by Shachris, when there's no Halal, you say it. So Rabbi Yossi is arguing, he is agreeing. It must be Ella Maimed the Musaf. They are speaking about the Maimed connected to Musaf. The day Nami Loi Dachi. But how can you say that? It doesn't delay its own, like we just said. It for sure delays its own. We're going with Ravashi. Ella, it must be that what Maimed is Rabbi Yossi referring to Mincha. Right? But Korban Eitzim should be Doicha. Because when there's Korban Eitzim, don't forget that Rabbi Yeshua holds it's Doicha Ne'ilah. Rabbi Akiva should hold that it's Doicha Mincha. Elolav, it must be that this sheet of Rabbi Yossi is Takem. Korban Eitzim, when there is Korban Eitzim, is Doicha Ne'ilah. But the Korban Eitzim will not be Doicha Mincha. Why won't the Korban Eitzim be Doicha Mincha? No. Korban Eitzim is Doicha Mincha, but it's not Doicha Ne'ilah. What Rabbi Yosef is holding that when there is a Korban Eitzim, you do the Maimed by Ne'ilah. Even the Mishnah Rabbi Yeshua holds that it's the Machlekes in the Mishnah was about Korban Musaf. Very good. In the Mishnah, we learned that Korban Eitzim is Doicha Ne'ilah. We just had above the Svara that Mincha has an Iker Min HaTorah, Ne'ilah doesn't. It must be that when Korban Eitzim is brought, then according to Rabbi Yossi, unlike the Tanakama, you do make the Maimed service by Ne'ilah. And this is even when the Musaf is brought. So Shma Mino, what do we see from Rabbi Yossi? That Musaf suspends its own, the Lavdi day, but in principle, not when there is Korban Eitzim. When there is no Korban Eitzim, then in principle, Rabbi Yossi holds that the Korban only suspends its own Maimed. Now, if there is Musaf and there's Korban Eitzim, then he's moided that it's not Musaf and not Mincha, but yes, Ne'ilah. And if there's no Korban Eitzim, then you'll even do it on Mincha. You will even make Maimed and Mincha Gavaldik. We'll stop over here. That's the source that we see that Rabbi Yossi holds that in principle, whenever there is a extra Korban, like Halal and Shachris, it suspends its own Tefillah. Halal only suspends Shachris L'Kula Alma. According to Rabbi Yossi, when you have extra Korbanos, Rabbi Yossi, it only suspends the Maimed gathering during that time. So Musaf will suspend the Maimed of Musaf, and then the other two Tanaim in our Mishnah, which is the original Rabbi Akiva and then Rabbi Yeshua, they hold that it suspends its own, and ultimately everyone was moided, it suspends the one afterwards, and that's it. And God willing, a lot more to be continued.
Wow. Shkoyach, Rabbi.
Well,
but I have a lot of hiccups.
Next one.
Rabbi.